No, don't do that, Natasha. Don't give me hope. Okay, all Avengers Endgame memes aside, there's a very particular reason why Habs on Reddit posted this Avengers Endgame meme on Twitter. What I wanted to do in this video was go over the response and why exactly this sentiment is even being brought up, because the Habs on Reddit crew went out there and retweeted this image in response to a Grant McCagg tweet from earlier yesterday. This tweet and the ideas behind it, these are our topics for today's video. And I say topics plural because there are a few things that are talked about in here. And of course, you know, Grant McCagg is Grant McCagg. He is a former NHL scout, and he's a guy whose opinions, for better or for worse, are usually listened to and discussed online. So, yesterday, McCagg tweeted this out, saying that he has a strange feeling that Ivan Demidov will drop to the Montreal Canadiens at 5, and they'll snag him up. If that happens, Grant would also love to see the Canadiens land Igor Shurin, two of his favorite Russian prospects in recent memory, and giving each of them a countrymate to help with the adaptation. That strange feeling is probably you turning off the PS5 and going to bed. I didn't even see that at first. Tyler Bouchane going out there and smoking Grant McCagg. You turning off the PS5 and going to bed because that's not happening. Then Grant goes out there and replies, well, if anyone would know, it would be you. Every scout, agent, and manager I've spoken to told me you are the one person with the precise knowledge of who is getting drafted where. Okay, that's kind of a big blow back, but either way, this idea of Ivan Demidov going to the Montreal Canadiens at the 5th overall spot certainly is interesting because, as we had talked about over the past few days here, Demidov is consolidatedly ranked in the 2nd overall spot. All of these outlets have him as a super talented guy. The only reason he could even slip, though, is because he is from Russia, and that entire Russian factor does exist. We had seen some other analysts and prospect people go out there and say that this year, as more than any before, the Russian factor is making word when it comes to Ivan Demidov. And you can say it's a very similar thing compared to what happened with Mishkov last year, but either way, Demidov could be one of these steals if he decides to go over to the NHL a little bit early and he ends up slipping somewhat in the draft because of that uncertainty. Either way, we did talk about this the other day, saying that the Montreal Canadiens apparently do want Caden Lindstrom more than Demidov. If both were available, then they would go with the big Medicine Hat Tigers forward. But we also talked about the ideas as to whom else the Canadiens could draft if both Demidov and Lindstrom were taken. Let's go back over to that Grant McCagg tweet before we continue on with this conversation here. McCagg goes out there and says this: there are plenty of people in the scouting world who think that Artyom Levshunov is going to Chicago and Anton Saliv is going to Anaheim. Columbus may opt for Senecki or Lindstrom because they took both of them out to dinner at the Combine, and there's no shortage of intrigue this year as a result. This, of course, is a big, bold prediction, but it's one where if you take a look at the individual assets and the parts that make the prediction, it's not the craziest thing in the world. Like, if you go over here to the Tankathon list, okay, first overall, we know that Macklin Celebrini is going over to San Jose. That's not surprising at all. He's been first overall projected since last year, pretty much, and he is number 1 across the board everywhere. If this guy goes out there and has a career similar to Jack Hughes, I don't think anybody would be surprised. If he's better than Jack Hughes, I don't know if too many people would be surprised either. So, San Jose taking their hometown guy, Macklin Celebrini, that's great. I know what you're thinking, wait a minute, hometown? He's from Vancouver. Yes, he is from Vancouver, but he grew up in the San Jose Bay Area because his dad works for the Golden State Warriors. But either way, Celebrini is going 1. Number 2 to Chicago is interesting because if the Blackhawks wanted to just go BPA, they wanted to go with the most highly ranked player at that spot, then it would technically be Ivan Demidov, but if they don't want to go down that path, they don't want to give Connor Bedard a beautiful, fantastic playmaker to play alongside of, they could go with Artyom Levshunov, the guy who was touted as the most NHL-ready player in this draft, especially on defense. Big dude, 6'2", right-handed, 18-year-old defenseman who produced a whole bunch of points this season while also being an absolute monster. This guy is a defensive beast. He's physical, he can knock down opponents, he kind of bullied people in the NCAA despite being only 18 years old. So for Levshunov, this is a guy who, if he's taken by Chicago, he could be thrusted right into an NHL top 4 role right away, especially if it's on Chicago, and he'll probably tread water just fine, setting himself up for some extended development into the long-term future. Of course, you could debate whether or not it's really worth it to take these big dudes straight out of their junior or NCAA teams and thrust them into the NHL right away. We've seen negative results after rushing bigger dudes in the past. Tyler Myers is one that comes to my mind. I'd say Rasmus Ristolainen is another one of these guys. Does Levshunov have a similar sort of profile into the future, or is he actually going to develop into a legitimate top 2 guy who can play 25 to 26 minutes a night while also providing good physicality and point production? We'll see, but Chicago ultimately has that choice at their fingertips. Meanwhile, for the 3rd overall spot, if you go Anton Silayev here for the Anaheim Ducks, it's a pretty interesting pick because Silayev is the biggest defenseman in the draft. 6'7", 207, big dude, left-handed guy. His rankings are all over the place. Some have him at number 2, others have him at number 12. His consolidated rank is number 8. And in the KHL this season, he didn't really produce too many points, but he was a very good shutdown beast. He's good defensively. He played a whole bunch of KHL games for a reason. If the Anaheim Ducks say, fine, let's just focus more on proper defenders rather than guys who can go out there and produce big points from the blue line, like Tristan Luneau, like Pavel Mintyukov, like Olin Zellweger, then Silayev could be a really good complement to that trio of defenders. But, of course, this is all just what Grant McCagg is hearing. If the Anaheim Ducks decide to take Demidov instead, if the Blackhawks take Demidov, then everybody else slides around. Columbus, though, if McCagg is saying that Columbus will opt for either a Senecki or a Caden Lindstrom, that would be interesting as well. You want to see the next line mates for Adam Fantilli long term. You want to see who could potentially replace a Kent Johnson if that guy gets traded. Either of these guys would be interesting options, especially when it comes to the size, because they would be upgrading pretty significantly in that respect. Beckett Senecki, 6'2", 181. Caden Lindstrom, 6'4", 216. There's a lot of potential with both of these guys. But is it enough to overtake the Ivan Demidov special, where it's like, yeah, this guy could become a legitimate number 1 forward on a team, let alone just a number 1 center or a winger, a number 1 forward? He could be the best point producer on an NHL team by the time he hits his prime year in and year out, if he's not playing with some other superstar franchise caliber guy. It's just that Russian factor is really holding things back here, which is why Grant McCagg is predicting that Demidov slips all the way to number 5. Of course, though, I will say this again, like we had said at the beginning of the video, Grant McCagg isn't really a bum when it comes to talking about stuff on social media. He has sources, he has connections, so when he's going out there and saying, yeah, people believe that this could happen, that Levshunov could go 2, Silayev number 3, and then Senecki or Lindstrom number 4, it does leave the door open, Silk Sonic style, for Demidov, the prized Russian in this year's draft, to slip all the way to the Montreal Canadiens at number 5. And if that's the case, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your opinions about these draft rumors that Grant McCagg is going out there and talking about? If you're a fan of the Blackhawks or of the Ducks or of the Columbus Blue Jackets, what are your thoughts on these 3 guys that your teams could go out there and take? If you're a Blackhawks fan, would you want Levshunov at number 2? It's seeming like they're going to go that route. A lot of the rumors that have been spewed by people other than Grant McCagg have indicated how Levshunov seems to be maybe the number 1 target for Chicago at number 2. If you're a Ducks fan, what are your thoughts about taking Silayev? Would you want a different defenseman instead? Do you want a little bit more offensive potential from a guy like Zayne Parekh or a Sam Dickinson? Or is the big Russian somebody that you want the most? If you're a Blue Jackets fan, what are your thoughts about these forwards potentially being taken? Would you take these guys over Ivan Demidov if you had the choice? You already took one Russian goal scorer in Igor Chernyshov a few years ago. Do you want to take another one? Let's see. And if you're, of course, a Montreal Canadiens fan, what are your opinions on the idea of Demidov dropping to number 5? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.